She was an expert trainer, a rising star in the world of marine performance. With over a decade of experience and a deep, almost instinctive bond with the animals she worked with, Jessica Radcliffe was living the kind of dream most people only imagine. Her life was filled with the sound of splashing water, the scent of salt in the air, and the thrill of standing beside some of the most intelligent creatures on Earth. But on one tragic afternoon in front of a live audience, everything changed. In a matter of seconds, the course of her life, and the entire marine park industry, would be altered forever. The water churned, the trainer vanished from sight, and what followed would shock the nation and force a reckoning with an industry built on beauty, danger, and spectacle. This is the horrifying last moment of Orca trainer Jessica Radcliffe, and the secret history no one talks about. Welcome to the Animal Quest channel. If you're fascinated by true animal encounters and the untold stories that unfold behind closed gates, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because today's story is one you'll never forget. Now, let's begin. Long before she ever set foot inside an orca tank, long before her name would be etched into the headlines, Jessica Radcliffe was just a little girl with a big dream. She grew up in a quiet Midwestern town, surrounded not by oceans but by fields and farmland. The irony was striking. She was obsessed with the sea, though she had never actually seen it. While other kids played house or sports, Jessica spent her time memorizing marine mammal facts. She could list every known species of dolphin by heart, recite the migration patterns of humpback whales, and she knew the name of every single orca at Sealand by the time she was 12. Her 13th birthday changed everything. Her parents, aware of her obsession, took her to Sealand, a sprawling marine park on the Florida coast. The moment she walked through the gates and saw her first orca up close, something inside her clicked. The sheer size, the grace, the intelligence in the animal's eyes, it wasn't enough for her to simply visit. She didn't want to watch from the stands, she wanted to be part of their world. She wanted to belong. Through her teenage years, she set her sights on a career that many considered unrealistic. But Jessica was nothing if not determined. In her early 20s, she joined the park, not as a trainer right away but as an entry-level assistant. She scrubbed buckets, prepared fish, and studied the animals from behind the scenes. For months she never touched a whistle or stepped into a tank. Instead she learned. She studied behavior patterns, learned the subtle cues of body language, and memorized the feeding routines of each marine mammal. Her passion was undeniable. Within a few short years she climbed the ranks to senior trainer. Jessica specialized in behavioral enrichment, developing creative ways to keep the animals engaged, mentally stimulated, and happy in their artificial environment. She worked with dolphins, belugas, and eventually the most dangerous of them all, orcas. Jessica wasn't just a trainer. She was family to these animals. She understood their cues, their moods, their fears, and their pain. She believed the bond between human and whale could be built on mutual trust. But trust, especially with an apex predator weighing 6 tons, is fragile. It can be powerful, but it can also be unpredictable. Before he was known as Titan, he was just a calf, no more than 2 years old, swimming in the cold, dark waters off the coast of Iceland. He stayed close to his mother and his pod, learning the clicks, whistles, and songs that made up their family's language. But one day, those songs were silenced by the roar of engines and the snap of nets. Titan was captured, torn from his mother's side, and hauled into captivity in 1983. He would never see the wild again. From the very beginning, Titan struggled in captivity. The tanks were too small. The water felt wrong. The noise from filtration systems, crowds, and shows was disorienting. And the other orcas around him, they weren't family. At his first facility, aggression was already being documented, not toward trainers at first but toward other whales. He was often isolated, often punished. In 1991, during what should have been a routine training session, tragedy struck. A female trainer slipped and fell into Titan's pool. Witnesses claimed he grabbed her and pulled her under. By the time rescuers reached her, it was too late. The death was officially ruled an accident. The report stated there was no way to determine whether Titan had intended harm. Nevertheless, his reputation was sealed. Titan was transferred again, this time to Sealand, where he was rebranded as the park's star performer. Larger than any whale they had ever housed before, Titan was majestic, powerful, and a crowd favorite. But behind the curtain, trainers whispered their unease. He ignored commands. He sometimes refused to eat. He displayed flashes of aggression, and the fear began to spread among staff. But Jessica Radcliffe wasn't afraid. She believed in redemption even for a whale with Titan's history. She believed that with patience, respect, and care, trust could be built. What no one realized then was that Titan had already crossed a line once before, and that, in the animal world, lightning can strike twice. It was a typical February afternoon. The seats were full. Families, tourists, and children all gathered to watch the park's signature orca show. The air was alive with excitement. Nobody could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold. Jessica was scheduled to perform the finale, a segment she had done dozens of times. The routine was familiar, rehearsed, and usually flawless. Titan emerged from the water right on cue. The audience erupted into cheers. Jessica gave the signal. He leapt high into the air. He spun. He crashed back into the pool, sending a wall of water into the front rows. It was a perfect start. They were in sync, until they weren't. Everything was going as planned, until Jessica got just a little too close. Without warning, Titan's massive jaws clamped down around her ponytail. In a violent motion, he yanked her into the water. For a moment, the crowd thought it was part of the act. But seconds ticked by and Jessica did not resurface. Titan was not letting go. What followed was a terrifying display of raw power. Titan thrashed violently, dragging Jessica beneath the surface again and again. Trainers on deck immediately sounded the emergency alarms. Nets were thrown into the water. Signals were given, hand cues, whistles, buckets of fish. Every tool they had was deployed. But nothing worked. Titan refused to release her. The attack lasted more than 30 minutes. By the time Jessica's body was recovered, it was too late. The show had come to a halt. The music cut abruptly. Sirens wailed through the stadium. Staff shouted into radios, "Code Black, Code Black." The code for a fatal incident. Emergency crews raced in, but the clock had already run out. Witnesses described the scene as surreal. One moment Jessica surfaced, gasping for air, reaching for the side. The next, she was yanked back under by thousands of pounds of muscle. Some parents shielded their children's eyes. Others, frozen in shock, kept filming. The stadium's joyful noise had transformed into a tense, horrified silence, broken only by the sound of alarms and the churn of the water. He's not letting her go. Oh my God. Is that real? Jessica was pulled under again and again, disappearing beneath the churning water only to resurface for the briefest of moments before being dragged back down by the immense force of the animal gripping her. At one point, Titan surged violently from the water, the glistening black and white of his massive body breaking the surface, and beside him, trailing limply and motionless, was Jessica's lifeless form. It was a sight that left witnesses frozen, stunned in disbelief, and one that would etch itself into the memories of everyone present. The situation stretched on in a horrifying loop, minute after minute, as more than 30 agonizing minutes passed before the Marine Park's emergency team could finally isolate Titan. Only after that dangerous, exhausting process were they able to retrieve Jessica's body from the water. The injuries were catastrophic. The initial reports, delivered in the sterile, matter-of-fact language of incident logs, told a far more brutal truth than any euphemistic phrasing could disguise. They noted blunt force trauma, severe, crushing impacts consistent with being struck by thousands of pounds of muscle and bone. There were deep, jagged lacerations that could only have been caused by teeth. The combination of these injuries, alongside prolonged submersion, had resulted in a complete loss of life at the scene. By the time the crowd exited the stadium, there were no more screams. No more applause. No shouts of delight or calls for an encore. There was just silence. A heavy, suffocating silence from people who had walked in expecting an afternoon of excitement and walked out having watched a nightmare unfold in real life. The park was shut down within the hour. Gates were locked, shows canceled without hesitation. Local authorities arrived quickly, launching a formal investigation, while federal agencies stepped in to assess exactly what had gone wrong. Jessica Radcliffe, just 38 years old, a woman who had devoted her adult life to the care and training of marine animals, was pronounced dead at the scene. Later, her autopsy would confirm what many feared from the moment the attack began. She had died from a combination of drowning and massive blunt force trauma. The scale and nature of her injuries matched the horrifying witness accounts. She had been dragged, struck, and submerged repeatedly, her body unable to endure the relentless assault. News of the incident exploded across global media. Within hours, headlines began running on a loop. Trainer killed by killer whale. Orca turns violent during live show. Television anchors spoke in grave tones, talk shows speculated endlessly, cable news debated every angle, and online outlets dissected each moment with alarming speed. But soon, another layer of the story emerged. One that cast the tragedy in an even more troubling light. This wasn't the first time Titan had been involved in a death. The public began asking questions the park seemed unprepared or unwilling to answer. Animal rights groups seized the moment to reignite their long-standing campaigns against orca captivity. Within days, protests formed outside Sealand's gates, swelling in number and intensity. Homemade signs demanded justice for Jessica and freedom for Titan. Social media amplified the message. Hashtags surged across platforms, trending in multiple countries. The tragedy had transcended the boundaries of a single event. It had become a symbol for a larger, deeply uncomfortable conversation. In the immediate aftermath, Sealand issued a carefully worded statement. It called the incident a tragic accident and expressed formal condolences to Jessica's family. Yet behind the scenes, a different atmosphere prevailed, one of urgent damage control. Staff were instructed not to speak to the media under any circumstances. Every word had to be filtered through official channels. Then came the leaks. Internal memos dated over several years, revealing that the park had documented troubling behavioral issues with Titan long before Jessica's death. Reports described incidents of aggression, refusals to follow commands, and moments of unpredictable behavior during rehearsals and shows. Despite these red flags, Titan had remained a central feature of the park's performances. The public conversation shifted again. It was no longer framed purely as a tragic accident. It had become a discussion about an industry built on spectacle, an industry that asked trainers to perform with wild, intelligent predators under the guise of safety, and about the true cost of entertainment when profit and reputation are on the line. For many, Jessica's death was not just another story in the news cycle, it was a turning point. In the weeks that followed, Titan was permanently removed from all public performances. There would be no more leaping displays, no more carefully choreographed moments in front of roaring crowds. Instead, he was confined to a backstage tank, out of view and out of the spotlight, yet never far from the center of public debate. And while the park may have been able to hide Titan from physical sight, they could not remove him from the conversation. His name had become a flashpoint. Jessica's family, initially private in their grief, stepped forward with poise and determination. They made it clear that their fight was not solely about personal loss. It was about ensuring that no other trainer would face the same fate without being fully aware of the risks. They demanded answers. They demanded transparency. They demanded accountability from Sealand, pressing for a full public release of safety protocols, historical incident reports, and any internal assessments that might have predicted the danger. They were not alone. Across the country, safety audits were launched in marine parks, some by regulatory agencies, others by the parks themselves under mounting public pressure. New regulations followed swiftly, barring trainers from entering tanks with orcas during live performances, a change many experts had been advocating for years. OSHA, the federal agency responsible for workplace safety, stepped in decisively. They handed down fines and formal mandates that would permanently alter the way these facilities operated. Yet the legacy of Jessica's death went beyond policy changes. It sparked a cultural reckoning. In the years that followed, documentaries and exposés multiplied, each peeling back another layer of secrecy around the marine entertainment industry. The most famous, Blackfish, would go on to reach millions worldwide, drawing heavily from Titan's history and the events that led to Jessica's final moments. Public perception shifted dramatically. People began asking not just how these animals were treated but why they were kept at all. Attendance at marine parks dipped. Petitions gathered tens of thousands of signatures in days. The narrative of harmless family fun had been punctured, irreversibly. Jessica Radcliffe's story became more than just a headline. It became a symbol, a warning, a reminder that even the most experienced, the most dedicated, the most beloved professionals could still be vulnerable in the presence of a force of nature that could never be fully controlled. She had been the face of Sealand's success. Now she was the face of its most devastating failure. Her name became shorthand for a broader truth, that no matter how skilled the human, no matter how well trained the animal, the risks inherent in this unnatural arrangement could never be erased. Her story, paired with Titan's troubled history, forced uncomfortable but necessary questions. Was this preventable? Could the tragedy of Jessica Radcliffe's death have been avoided? Or was Titan simply being what he was, a wild animal once free in the open sea, whose instincts had been twisted and frayed by decades of confinement? And if Titan was also a victim, robbed of the space, the social structure, and the environment that defined his species, then what did that mean for the morality of the industry as a whole? When we look at the story of Jessica and Titan, we are forced to confront the deeper issue. When wild animals are placed on display for our entertainment, who is truly in control? Is it the trainers who dedicate their lives to reading body language, developing routines, and cultivating trust? Or is it the animals whose strength, instincts, and unpredictability remain fundamentally beyond human mastery? These questions have no easy answers, but they linger, especially for those who witnessed that day. The tragedy of one woman, one whale, and the many lives forever changed stands as a story that shook the world, a story that opened our eyes to a reality we can no longer ignore. What do you think? Could this have been prevented? Do you believe animals like Titan should be kept in captivity for our entertainment? Comment your thoughts below. And if you want to hear more real-life animal stories that shook the world, subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines.